Welcome back to my disembodied voice. Great characters in the history of movies are well defined, relatable, identifiable, and memorable. And there are reasons for that, which encompass their conflict, philosophy, backstory, confidence, and character arc. But one of the first bases we encounter when completing all four base home runs of character definition is attitude. And this works the same in real life as well, as we make instant judgments about people when we meet them based upon clothes, conduct, mood, approachability, and of course, the aforementioned attitude. Now, for anyone who has been told, "Not with that attitude," or "Why don't you try changing your attitude?" will know what I mean, or if you work in customer services or any front facing job with the public, a bad attitude can really ruin your day. And that's because attitude is a complex mechanism of dynamics which we project our view and then introject our feelings about people or situations, and, like everyone else, we can sometimes be a dick about things or be really optimistic and make people gravitate towards us. Attitudes are sets of feelings, beliefs, and behaviours, especially towards particular objects, persons, or events. Impression management is an attempt to control how others perceive us by displaying false, inauthentic, or misleading attitudes. Authentic attitudes motivate and guide autopilot behaviour even when no one is looking. Attitudes reflect values or lack thereof. For example, with an attitude of connection, partners feel connected when they're apart and even when they disagree. We can be optimistic or pessimistic, resentful, entitled, demanding, superior, or even our attitude can make us feel inferior. And great characters change their attitudes as part of their arcs, and we can see and feel their rewards or deserved punishments when they occur on screen. For example, a resentful attitude can be replaced with an attitude of connection, and entitlement can be replaced with an attitude of fairness, and, in films, like in the superhero genre, this is what completes their character arcs. So, for today's video, join me as we take a deep dive into attitude and look at its importance in a wide variety of movies. So, before I start, it's spoilers ahoy for any movie we touch on today, and, as ever, we'll be following a flow-through chart, and today's topics are the economics of perception, shaping a subjective reality, character development, psychodynamics. Right then, let's crack on. Okay, so how do we start to define attitude in a nutshell or screenshot? Well, personality disorder expert Theodore Millon outlined attitude, and he referred to it as the economics of perception. Attitude is a psychological construct. It's the settled way you think or feel about something, shaped by beliefs, emotions, and experiences. It's about your internal stance towards a person, object, or idea. Now, in terms of economics, for psychology, this means we homogenize, stereotype, judge, assess, and filter the object or person into our complex world of logicality and subjective investments, trade-offs, and interactions. And for that, we're talking about our attitude equaling the following structure: perceived benefits, perceived costs, beliefs, emotions. And this basically means that, taking each one in case, perceived benefits equals what we believe you gain in terms of pleasure and alignment with values. Perceived costs equals what you believe you lose in terms of risk, money, emotional strain, and value. Beliefs equal ideas you hold to be true about the object or situation. And emotions equals feelings that amplify or suppress perceived value. And all this is done as we use perception to notice or experience something, then we make a cognitive appraisal to evaluate it in terms of beliefs versus risk trade-off, then weigh the emotional side with feelings tilting the balance between positive or negative, which finally leads to attitude formation of the favourable, neutral, or unfavourable stance. Okay, so let's take some movie genres first and look at the economic perception for our characters. And the reason I'm choosing movie genres at this stage, as we're still quite broad in definition and we need to stay that before we narrow it down. Now, in the slasher movie and also the backwoods brutality genre, which covers movies like Wrong Turn and Deliverance, Middle America is seen as a very insulated place. Now, whether playing to the gallery of stereotypes or basing the films on real-life encounters, these communities are isolated from the outside and contain close-knit locals who have little time for liberal teenagers. Be it the Bible Belt, traditional views about things like sexuality, abortion, or culture, the attitude is that horny teens are not welcome with their liberal and modern views. And be it Friday the 13th, Wrong Turn, or even the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, at some point you'll find the old-timer or stereotypical yokel brand native who straight away doesn't like the outsiders or warns them, tells them to turn round, or makes some jibe at them for having odd hair. So the attitude in the slasher movie is that liberal teens aren't like the local close-knit communities. They bring ungodly hedonism with premarital sex, drugs, and they don't believe in religion. Now, the perceived benefits are that killing these kids is either food, fun, or it just keeps things traditional because we don't like outsiders. The perceived costs are that these communities govern themselves and there is very little law enforcement, and when there is, such as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, the sheriff will be more likely of a similar ilk to the locals or even related to the locals. The beliefs are what is engendered in the community about their feelings towards religion. Also, the fact that they've stagnated in time, and seeing progressive youths is an omen of the destruction of their traditions by bringing this liberal view into a very old-fashioned world. And the emotions are all negative, angry, and full of hate as they begin slicing the kids or backpackers up. Now, let's go to the superhero genre. Well, what it used to be and not whatever the sludge Marvel has served up post-Endgame, and see how that follows a similar attitude path. The attitude for the superhero is that they have an awesome new power, but with great power comes great responsibility, or that they are in a position to make positive change when the city is so big and lost to lawlessness that general people on their own cannot do it, and it needs someone who either has greater power, greater wealth, or is basically more determined to stop the corruption. For the hero, the perceived benefits are that they right wrongs and avenge those who have lost by injustice repetition. Peter Parker blames himself for Uncle Ben dying and tries to make reparations by honouring his words and looking out for the little guy, and this almost de facto revenge or avenging reinforces his principles. Bruce Wayne loses his parents, and he decides when he grows up that seeing the corruption in the city isn't good enough anymore, and he remembers being powerless that day. He's not going to be powerless anymore, but he's going to stop people from feeling powerless by taking on the crime syndicates. The perceived costs to the superhero is their relationships and also the danger of almost being killed every night. The beliefs of the superhero is that they are incorruptible and will not fold like corrupt cops, or that they are fighting a greater cause and being noble will keep them going and not let power corrupt them. And the emotions for the superhero are all part of the arc we invest in as they go through grief, to triumph over a personal demon. Usually the enemy is related, implicated, or involved in aspects of their life, or have done something which has caused a great grievance to the hero, and they project their decency and beliefs in victory, capture, but not murder, as that would make them the same as the criminals they fight. In other words, the emotions are all about the character arc we go on with the superhero. And this model can be put through any genre, be it the romantic comedy, the revenge movie, or even science fiction. But rather than just keep repeating that, you get it now. You get about costs, beliefs, emotions, and so forth. So let's move on and go to our next stage of attitude, which is shaping subjective reality. Our childhood experiences, environments, caregivers, and our cultures all shape who we are and how we perceive our phenomenal field of reality. We are all made the way we are by our mental schema, which is formed through the lived experience of both positive and negative stimuli. Now, a schema is a thinking pattern for screening, coding, and evaluating events. Schemas are stable and rigid beliefs about oneself and one's relationship with others. And these schemas form the glasses through which we look at the world. And we use schemas to generate expectations about a given situation or to assess options and make decisions. Self-schemas influence emotional reactions. Emotional feelings are all cognitive interpretations of situations that we live through. For example, let's look at the revenge genre, and what is threatening to the protagonist builds an accumulation of memories, trauma, and anger from the egregious experience of what they go through, the particular threat and trauma, which then eventually affects the protagonist into retaliation. The interpretation, anger, and perceived injustice then causes the protagonist to fight back, and in revenge films, the attitude is all about giving into the darkness and more than likely being consumed by it, as the egregious crime is recompensated by an even more egregious act of aggression. Once someone is pushed over the edge by trauma, we develop retaliation in absolutes, and this means that any previous attitudes and beliefs are eradicated by the venom, hatred, and desire to get personal justice, either by just killing or slowly torturing the antagonist to death. This also forms the like I care and who gives a damn attitude as the person slides into self-destruction, which is the opposite of the superhero who values the benefits over the costs and holds their beliefs steady. Now, negative schemas are not exclusive to the revenge genre. All protagonists are pushed by conflict and consequences and must go on the character journey where they learn and metabolize and change their schema for an outcome either positive or negative. In the movie Anna, the main protagonist is called, well, Anna, and is played by the truly beautiful and lush Sasha Luss. Anna comes from a background of domestic abuse and drugs and is drafted into the KGB. She knows she isn't leaving, but holds the word of Luke Evans, who promises that she will get 5 years and then get to disappear. Of course, this is a selective truth and nobody lives 5 years as a KGB assassin, so when Anna does start to progress and work towards her exit, the forces above combine and deny her. Anna then meets the Americans, who offer her a genuine way out, or so it seems, but from her days as a screw toy for her boyfriend and being used as a piece of meat, she sees through this and openly states, "People always want to sleep with me." And then she uses this femme fatale style and her sexuality to beat both the CIA and the KGB by literally screwing both powerful people she needs to organise a checkmate. Anna even admits at the end of the movie that if she only gets the 6 months of freedom that is promised to her, it would be a lifetime following years of abuse, servitude, and manipulation. Anna knows she is a pawn, lost, and so she uses her best weapon, her body, and her sexuality, as I said, to literally screw Luke Evans and Oppenheimer himself, Cillian Murphy, into a chess-themed checkmate, which ends the film. She just wants freedom, and her attitude is to double-cross whoever she needs to and use her best assets to get this. Let's look at Obi-Wan in Star Wars, minus the god-awful Obi-Wan show, which deconstructed the attitude and beliefs of one of the most stoic Jedis ever, and go back to the prequels when Obi-Wan is told by Qui-Gon Jinn that Anakin is the chosen one, but when this turns bad and Anakin becomes more machine now than man and turns into Darth Vader, Obi-Wan doesn't lose hope. His attitude remains that Luke will be the saviour of the Jedi, so adds up the costs of giving his own life to protect the boy, and this keeps him hopeful, optimistic, it keeps his beliefs going, and he stays determined that the Emperor will fall and the Empire will be beaten when all other hope is lost, and the Empire in full ascendancy. Without his attitude and his economics of perception, Obi-Wan would just give up, end his life, or simply sulk into a negative thought. But when we meet him in A New Hope, he is full of optimism, even when the Empire flame grill Luke's aunt and uncle, and the Millennium Falcon is captured by the Death Star tractor beam. His belief and hopes are propped up by his attitude, and this is what Disney didn't understand when they made him a broken old man in the TV series. His phenomenal field of reality is how he exists day to day in his mental schema, but he's been made that way through his development. And development matters in movies, as without it, we have staccato characters who are boring and dull, and that's because of character development. We all change as people all the time, and great characters must evolve through tests and resilience so we can see the changes in attitudes and thus the building of schema. Schemas come from our conditioning and our learning habits, and our attitude is formed through repeated activation of the schema, which makes it more durable and less sensitive to new information. Superheroes face challenge after challenge which puts them through the mill, and they will face temptation to abandon their beliefs, but their attitude of positivity keeps them on the right track. But great characters should fail and fall as they are tested, and their superior and inferior attitudes are opposite sides of the same coin and sometimes need to come into conflict. Part of the reason we rise after adversity is because we respond via an adaptation to a negative event. And this is where our attitudes change. Now, you, dear viewer, are not the same person you were when you were a kid, or you're not even the same person you were a year ago. And so, in movies, a selfish and negative attitude can be replaced with an attitude of compassion and assertiveness. And that comes through the either side of each attitude warring and then being developed through the person's experiences. Westerns and action movies often start with people who have a foul attitude, but this softens as they fall in love and see the response and respect of those they are in the adventure with. In shark movie The Meg, Jason Statham is a reclusive alcoholic after nobody believed him about the giant shark, and when approached, he pushes everyone away. Over time, though, as he is proved right and he bonds with the other characters, his gruff selfishness becomes an overt selflessness. And both Han Solo from Star Wars and Rick from The Mummy start out as low-rent criminals who just want some cash, but as they fall in love, earn respect, meet people who leave an impression, and commit acts of greatness, their selfishness also becomes selflessness, and they stop being loners and become part of a team or a romantic relationship. The stubborn attitude we can spot a mile off when we first see them, irritable, isolated, angry, selfish, changes, and we come to love them as the journey progresses. They go from pessimism to optimism, isolation to love, and we love watching characters evolve, as this is how they become personal, as our own initial attitudes as the viewer changes and are challenged, and we learn to see them in a new light. It's important in movies that we look at our attitudes too, because we form assumptions based upon characters straight away, and we like to have that tested and changed. After all, it mirrors real life, where you meet someone and go, what a dick, only to find out actually, you have quite a lot in common and they're alright. We interpret everything we see or hear in terms of our schemas and our habitual thinking. And what we think and feel in a given situation is shaped by our past experiences, and only changes from a new repetitive stimuli can shift an attitude, because attitudes become entrenched and are often based on snap judgments or lived experiences which have caused great loss or harm. And be it Sarah Connor, Ellen Ripley, Ian Malcolm, Peter Parker, or even the supporting character CJ in the Dawn of the Dead remake, when we meet these characters, their attitudes are somewhat shallow, but evolve, become more rounded, and also much sharper by the horror and the trials they go through. And that's because of something called psychodynamics, unconscious mental processes that influence behaviour and feelings. Also, how childhood and unresolved issues cause defence mechanisms to manage difficult emotions and thoughts. In essence, psychodynamics provides a framework for understanding the complex interplay of conscious and unconscious forces that shape our personalities, behaviours, and mental schemas. They also offer insights into the roots of psychological distress and also prompt personal growth and well-being. In psychiatry, we talk about something called ACE, and this stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And this plays a major factor as we are at our most vulnerable when our brains haven't formed and we are powerless, young and developing and open to abuse from people who hold both physical, economical and situational power over us. In The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Lisbeth Salander is deemed not able to interact in society and, despite being brilliantly clever and resourceful, she is a complex mess of personality disorders and unresolved trauma. After the death of Lisbeth's lovely, gentle guardian, she is forced to perform oral sex on a new guardian who abuses her so she can get the allowance she is genuinely entitled to. This abuser then severely sexually assaults her, and this reinforces her beliefs that people are garbage, and her defence mechanism is to push everyone away. Her attitude, formed by experience and then developed into schema, is that all people are a threat and she isn't close to anyone. Even her sexual conquests are disposable shags from one-night stands, and she trusts nobody because her attitude has been shaped through severe abuse, isolation, violence and trauma from childhood. Clarice Starling in Silence of the Lambs also has childhood trauma and, whilst nowhere near as bad as Lisbeth's, is dealt with by channeling her energy into studying and getting away from her childhood and that awful screaming of the lambs. She wasn't abused, but her unconscious patterns are brought into conflict and conscious awareness by talking to Lecter, and we eventually develop to see just why she is who she is. Characters must grow, and their personal growth comes through emotional well-being and neglect, and as most movies are only a couple of hours long, we have a truncated time for this, so we are given things mostly in neon signs. However, not all adverse experiences are in childhood. In the movie War of the Worlds, oh dear God, not that one, no. In War of the Worlds, Tom Cruise is already a bit of a rubbish dad and losing his children, but his attitude and beliefs are that he will protect his children no matter what, and this spurs him on to escape, fight and nearly lose his life multiple times, all so he can get his daughter, and, through half of the film at least, his son, back home and to safety. In a similar degree, Naomie Harris in 28 Days Later has lost everything and sees no future and has a very nihilistic outlook. However, over time, she matures and falls in love with Oppenheimer and her attitude changes, but for most of the movie, her overall attitude is kill or be killed and make the worst decisions in a heartbeat and then just get on with life. Her defence mechanisms have been forged by seeing crowds crushed to death, the infected slaughter thousands, her personal loss and grief, and she shuts all this off into denial and suppression, and, when finally challenged and in danger, these memories resurface and her attitude is hardened by re-experiencing the same stimuli which strengthens her schema. Everything she sees is cost, not benefit, and her beliefs are formed through that. Naomie Harris, or I should call her Celine, is a true pessimist, and she does not think about love and the future because there isn't one, and her defence mechanism is to just keep moving. People are dead weights and you have to survive because that's all there is in life. And that attitude serves her well to a point, But once her attitude softens and the schema changes, she has a whole new outlook, and we are willing her to survive rather than finding her that prickly cold character who has no real beliefs and sees everything in cost in terms of the economics of perception. In other words, we can't really bond with her and we can't see her progressing for ourselves. Well, not with that attitude. Anyway, that's it for this week's video. So remember that psychology is cool. Please like, share and subscribe, as more subs means more vids. And even leave a comment or start a discussion, as healthy debate is always welcome on here. And as ever, until next time, I'll catch you later.
He looks heroic, but he's kind of got a negative attitude.